The crowd roared as dust filled the sky above the giant arena. Thousands of alien eyes watched from stone seats carved in a circle. Flags waved, horns blew, and drums pounded like thunder. This was not just a fight. It was a show of dominance, a test of blood, and today, a human was the offering. Jocks stood in the middle of the arena, shirtless, chained at the wrists, breathing hard. His muscles twitched with tension, his eyes locked on the giant metal gate across from him. The sun burned hot above him, but he didn't blink. He had survived worse on Earth, but this was something new. He had been captured days ago, dragged into this world, sold like a beast. Now he was thrown into an alien death match without knowing why. High above, in a golden balcony wrapped in silk and vines, sat Princess Elraya. Her silver eyes narrowed as she watched the human below. She didn't like him not because he was human, but because he looked calm, too calm, and she hated that. Beside her stood her loyal maid 6 women, dressed in royal white and silver armor. They whispered to each other about the human, calling him soft, fragile, doomed. But Elraya stayed silent. This was her arena. Her champion would fight today. And her champion had never lost. The ground trembled as the gate across from Jocks opened with a hiss. Out came the alien champion, standing over 8 feet tall, armor plated with bones of past enemies. He held a double-bladed axe, stained with old blood. The crowd cheered louder, screaming his name. Jocks did not move, his chains unlocked with a loud click, falling to the sand. A voice echoed in the arena, announcing the ancient rule. This is a blood claim fight should the outsider win. By law, he gains the rights of the summoner. Jocks didn't understand the words, but he felt the weight of them. Elraya smirked. Thinking it was impossible, no outsider had ever won a blood claim match. The champion charged first, sand flying under his feet. He roared. Swinging his giant axe in a wide arc, Jocks ducked, rolled, grabbed a fallen spear from the ground. The crowd gasped. No one had ever dodged the champion's first strike. Jocks moved like a storm, fast and brutal. He didn't fight with style. He fought to survive, and in just 5 moves, he found an opening. He slid under the alien's swing, turned, and with all his strength, drove the spear upward through the champion's chest. The alien froze, eyes wide, then fell forward in a heavy crash. But Jocks wasn't done. He picked up the axe, lifted it high, and brought it down with a shout. The blade split the champion clean in half. The arena went silent. Not a single cheer, not a single breath. Elraya stood slowly, her hands trembling. Her champion, the man she raised in training, her protector, was gone, and by the ancient law she invoked, she now belonged to the one who won. The royal priest stepped forward, voice shaking. By sacred law of the old blood, the one who defeats the champion shall claim the rights to the summoner's household. Princess Elraya and her 6 royal maids are now concubines under the victor's claim. Jocks blinked. Confused? What the hell does that mean? He muttered. The maids looked horrified. Elraya's face burned with rage and disbelief. She had become property of the man who split her champion in half. But Jocks didn't smile. He didn't bow. He turned and walked away, dragging the axe behind him. He didn't care about concubines or laws or royalty. He just wanted out of this nightmare. But the world had already changed, and the human they all mocked had just become the most dangerous man in the empire. The sun had not yet set, but the entire arena was already in shadow. Not from clouds, but from fear. The council chamber doors slammed open as Princess Elraya stormed in, her face pale but furious. Behind her, her 6 maids followed quietly, their heads low. Everyone had seen what happened in the arena. The champion was dead, the outsider had won, and the ancient law had spoken. The Royal Council of Elders stood in silence, unsure how to respond. These laws are old, one counselor whispered. We can override them. No, another said, shaking his head. If we break the law now, the people will revolt. Elraya stared at the floor, trying to make sense of it. She had lost more than a match. She had lost control. Somewhere deep beneath the palace, in a guarded chamber, Jox sat on a stone bench. His hands were still stained with blood. He stared at the weapon beside him, the axe he used to split the champion in half. He didn't understand the customs, the rules, or why people were calling him master. He didn't want any of it. He had killed only to survive. The end, the softest spoken of Elraya's maids. Entered the chamber, she moved slowly, holding a small scroll. "The princess didn't send me," she said quietly. "I came because you need to know what you've done." Jox raised an eyebrow. "I didn't ask for anything," then nodded. "And yet, by our oldest law, you now own 7 women." Jox flinched. "I don't want slaves." "Good," then said, placing the scroll beside him. "Then read this before they turn you into something you're not." The scroll explained the law in simple words. Whoever defeats a royal champion in open combat becomes the rightful holder of the Summoner's Bond. It was created long ago to prevent nobles from using warriors like tools. It forced nobles to think carefully before risking someone's life. But the law had been forgotten in time, until Elraya, proud and arrogant, invoked it herself. Now she was trapped by her own arrogance, and the human Jox held power over her. Later that night, the palace guards brought Jox to a guest chamber. No longer a prisoner, he walked past servants who bowed quickly, too afraid to meet his eyes. He hated it. He had no home here, no friends, no plan. But something told him this wasn't over. Elraya waited in the guest chamber, standing tall like nothing had happened. "You are not my master," she said coldly. Jox didn't answer. He just sat down. "I didn't ask to be," he finally said, "but I won't play your games." Elraya stepped closer, her voice low. "Then release me." Jox looked up. "Is that what your laws allow? A man can kill and claim, but not free." She hesitated. "You could challenge the law, but it would start a war." He leaned forward. "Then maybe your world needs one." The maids were outside the room, listening, then whispered to another. "He's not like our men. He's dangerous," the other replied. "No," Theen said softly. "He's different." The next morning, news spread across the city. A human had taken the blood claim, but did not touch his prize. He didn't chain them, didn't order them, didn't even speak like a conqueror. And that made the people curious. Could someone so strong choose mercy? In the council chambers, arguments broke out. "We must erase the old laws." "No, we must kill the human and silence this shame." But a few wiser ones whispered a new idea. "What if we learn from him instead?" By sundown, guards arrived to escort Elraya and her maids to the new master's quarters. They expected Jox to be waiting with smug words or cruel demands. But when they entered, he was gone. Only a note lay on the floor, written in shaky alien script. "I don't want concubines. I want peace." Elraya stared at the message, her hands shaking slightly. He could have done anything yet. He walked away. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to feel. Hatred, shame, curiosity. Or something more, and far outside the city walls, under a twin-moon sky. Jox built a fire and stared at the stars. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing. He wasn't part of their game, not yet. The princess stared at the note again, her fingers tightening on the paper as if it might change if she crushed it hard enough. "I don't want concubines, I want peace." It said. Elraya had expected many things from the human, but not this. She expected control, gloating, demands, even cruelty, but he had left, and somehow that hurt more than being claimed. The maid stood silently nearby, unsure if they should speak. Finally then broke the silence. "He left us. All of us. He disrespected the law," hissed Jory, the boldest of the maids, "and insulted the princess." "No," Elraya said, voice low. "He insulted no one that night." She could not sleep. She sat by the balcony, staring at the twin moons. Her people watched strength, feared it, worshipped it. And here was a man who won through strength and walked away from the reward. Was that weakness, odd, or something far more dangerous? In the morning, El Raya did something no princess had done in generations. She left the palace walls alone, with no guards. She covered her royal marks with a cloak, and followed a trail of rumors toward the edge of the forest, there, beyond the old stone river. She found a small campfire. Jocks was sitting on a rock, sharpening a long blade, his face blank. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You followed me?" he said, not unkindly. "You ran," she replied, stepping closer. "From power, I ran from being a prize," Jock said, "and from a world that treats women like trophies." El Raya clenched her fists. "We are not trophies, but I won you in a fight," he said calmly. "Didn't I?" She had no answer, only shame. They sat in silence. Then Jocks handed her a second blade. "Train with me," he said. "Learn how I fight." "Why?" she asked, confused. "Because I think your people need more than just strength. They need something real, and for the next hour." The princess fought beside the man who defeated her champion. He didn't hold back, but he didn't humiliate her either. He showed her how to move, how to shift weight, how to dodge not for glory, but for survival. She sweated, stumbled, and got angry. "Why are you helping me?" she asked through clenched teeth. "Because no one helped me," Jock said, wiping dust from his arm. "I want peace, but I'll fight if I have to." That night, back at the palace, El Raya did not speak to her council. She didn't scream, she didn't argue, she simply sat by her window, thinking. The next morning, something even stranger happened. Then returned from the market with news. People were talking about Jocks again. Not as a savage, but as a teacher. He had started training local outcasts, teaching them how to defend themselves. No price, no power, just survival. El Raya stood at the edge of the training ground later that day. Watching him teach, he helped a boy barely able to hold a wooden stick. He corrected a woman's posture gently. He laughed when someone tripped but helped them back up. He noticed El Raya and gave her a slight nod. She did not nod back, but she stayed. Hours passed, and she did not leave. Later that evening, the maids gathered in her chamber. "You've changed," one of them whispered. "I don't know what I am anymore," El Raya replied quietly, "but I know what I was before wasn't right." In her dreams, that night, she saw the face of her old champion. Proud, powerful, brutal. Then the dream shifted and she saw Jocks. Standing alone, not as a warrior, but as something more, a mirror, showing her what she feared to see. The next day, El Raya made a bold choice. She returned to the council chamber and said 3 words that froze the room. "I choose him." The council erupted. "Impossible. He is human. He is beneath us." But she raised her hand and silenced them. "I choose him not by law, but by will. If I must be bound, I will be bound by my heart." Jocks did not know what awaited him the next morning. But when he opened his eyes and saw El Raya standing beside his fire again, he simply said, "Back so soon?" She smiled for the first time. "This time, I didn't come to fight." And far in the shadows, someone else watched, not from curiosity, but from hatred. The council would not sit quietly for long, and a silent blade was already being sharpened. The night was silent, but it was not safe beneath the stars. A shadow moved through the trees like smoke. No scent, no footsteps, no sound. This was no thief, no scout. It was a killer trained by the High Council itself, an assassin from the old bloodlines. Sent not to warn, not to talk, but to end the human who had become too powerful. Jock sat near his fire, sharpening a spearhead. Unaware of the death creeping closer, he had grown used to quiet nights like this, far from the noise of the city. But tonight, the wind felt wrong. Too still, too heavy, like it was holding its breath. Back at the palace, El Raya tossed in her bed, her heart racing for no reason. She had not spoken to the council after declaring her choice. She had no need to. She already knew how they would respond with rage, fear, and silence that always came before blood. Then stood beside the window, looking out toward the forest. "The stars are dim tonight," she whispered. "Do you think they'll kill him?" One of the other maids asked. "No." Then replied, "They'll try." In the forest, the assassin reached the camp. His cloak was made of shadows, his blade dipped in poison that killed in seconds. He found Jocks sleeping beside the dying fire, his weapon out of reach. Perfect. The assassin raised his blade, took one silent step forward, and froze. Jocks' eyes opened slowly, calm, steady. "I heard you 5 minutes ago," he said quietly. "I was waiting." The assassin slashed forward, fast as lightning. Jocks rolled, grabbed a burning stick from the fire, and blocked the blade. Sparks flew. The fire roared back to life, and the two men clashed in a blur of steel and smoke. The assassin was trained to kill in silence, but Jocks fought with noise, with fury, with purpose. He didn't care about style. He wanted to live. The assassin cut deep into Jocks' side. Jocks grunted, dropped to one knee, and drove his spear forward. The weapon sank into the assassin's shoulder. They both fell, blood soaking the dirt. At that moment, El-Raya woke up with a scream. Without waiting, she threw on her cloak and ran from the palace. The maids followed, barefoot, breathless. They didn't need to ask where she was going, they already knew. By the time they reached the camp, the fire was low again. Jocks lay on the ground, blood around him, eyes half closed. The assassin was dead beside him, the poison blade broken in two. El-Raya dropped to her knees. Pressing her hands to Jocks' wound, "Stay with me," she whispered. "You came back," he muttered, a weak smile on his lips. "You promised not to fight," she said, voice shaking. "I lied," he said, then passed out, then moved quickly. Opening a small pouch of outlawed human medicine, El-Raya didn't stop her. "We'll be punished," one maid said. "Let them try," El-Raya snapped. "He saved me. I'll save him," as they worked to stop the bleeding. One of the maids found a mark on the assassin's neck. The black seal of the High Council. El-Raya's face turned cold. "They sent him to silence a man who refused power," she said. "But now they've made him a symbol." News spread fast the next day. People spoke of the human who survived an assassin's blade, of the princess who ran barefoot through the night to protect him, and of the maids who broke ancient laws to save a man they once feared. The council met in secret, furious and desperate. "This cannot continue." One hissed, "He's just one man." Another said, "No," said the oldest among them, "he is no longer alone." In his sleep, Jocks dreamed of fire and blood. He dreamed of chains breaking, of a city in flames. But when he woke, he saw El-Raya beside him, eyes red from crying. "You didn't run this time," he whispered. "I didn't want to," she said. "You're not a monster, and you're not a prize," he said. The princess reached for his hand. And for the first time, it wasn't law or tradition that bound them, it was choice. But far above the city, a new plan was already forming, and the war to come would not be fought in the arena. It would be fought in the hearts of an empire too proud to change. Jocks woke to the sound of soft humming. His wound still hurt, but it was clean and bandaged. The sunlight warmed his skin, and for a moment, he didn't feel like a prisoner or a fighter. He turned his head and saw El-Raya sitting nearby, humming a song under her breath. She stopped when she noticed he was awake. "You snore," she said quietly, trying not to smile. "You hum like a storm," he replied, his voice dry, and somehow both of them laughed. It was the first time they'd shared peace without weapons between them. No law, no fear, no shame. Just silence filled with something strange comfort. The maids brought food and water, speaking gently. No longer avoiding Jocks' eyes, even Jury, the bold one who once called him a savage, placed fruit in his hand without a word. Things were changing, slowly, but outside their little forest camp, the world remained the same. Back in the city, whispers turned to murmurs. and murmurs turned to voices. Some said the human was dangerous. Others said he was exactly what the Empire needed. The people had seen El Raya run to him, fight for him, bleed for him, and in a world ruled by fear, that meant something. The High Council sent a royal messenger to summon Jocks, but he refused. He said he would not return to the city as a prize or a weapon. He would return as a man with his own voice. That night, El Raya stood by the fire, watching the flames dance. Her heart felt heavy and light at the same time. She had been trained to be strong. Cold, perfect. But with Jocks, she didn't have to be perfect. She could be. Riel then approached quietly, holding something wrapped in cloth. "This was your mother's," she said, handing it to El Raya, a small pendant shaped like a broken star. "She wore it when she left the palace to marry your father. She said love is never due teats." A rebellion, El Raya held the pendant tightly. Her eyes shining, "I was never taught how to love," she whispered. "Then learn," then said. "Before they take him from us," in the days that followed, Jocks grew stronger. He trained again. But slower, more thoughtful. El Raya trained beside him not as a student now, but as a partner. They moved in rhythm, fought in rhythm, and slowly. They began to breathe in rhythm too. One evening, the maids sat around the fire, sharing stories. They talked about their old lives of fear, of silence, of being used. Jocks listened quietly. His hands clenched. "You were never free," he said. "No," Jory replied, "but neither were you." El Raya stood and walked to Jocks. Placing the pendant in his palm, "My mother gave this up for love," she said. "I'm ready to do the same." He looked at her, unsure. "You don't belong to me," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." They kissed under the firelight, not as master and concubine, not as warrior and princess, but as two broken people who had found something worth holding on to. The next morning, El Raya made a choice that shook the empire. She called for a gathering at the steps of the palace. The people came, expecting war or punishment. Instead, she stood beside Jocks and raised her voice. "No law should own a woman's heart," she said. "I am no man's slave, I chose him." The silence that followed was deep and long. Then, slowly, the people began to cheer. Some in shock, some in joy, some in secret fear. But in a shadowed tower, the High Council watched in silence. "She has crossed the line," one elder said. "She has burned the code," another added. "No," said the High Priest. "She has declared war." As the crowd cheered and the sky turned red with sunset, Jocks and El Raya held hands. Unaware of the army being prepared in the dark, unaware that their love had become a threat, unaware that the next time they stood before the people, it would be not just for love, but for survival. And the chains they had broken would soon be reforged, unless they shattered the empire itself. The city no longer felt the same. Markets still opened, merchants still shouted, soldiers still marched. But under the surface, something had shifted. The people whispered now not about warlords or nobles, but about a human. A man who broke no chains by force, but by choice. Jocks had returned to the palace not as a prisoner or warrior, but as a guest, even so. Guards watched him closely, their hands always near their weapons, but Jocks didn't flinch. He walked through golden halls like they meant nothing, because to him, they didn't. El Raya stood proudly beside him, her head held high, her royal badge removed. The maids no longer wore white silks, they wore training leathers. They had chosen not to serve, but to stand. Word spread faster than the council expected, in slums and villages. In outer colonies, workers and soldiers began to question the old rules. If a princess could choose a human, if a human could win a trial by blood and refuse power, then what else was possible? The council panicked in silence. "We must crush this before it spreads," one said. "The people love a rebel more than a ruler," another whispered. "They follow him now." The high priest said darkly, "But if we make him bleed, they will fear again." Plans were made. Troops moved in secret, an army built not for war, but for a message. Obey or vanish. But Jocks wasn't blind. He saw the signs, the heavier patrols, the sudden disappearances, the silence of once busy streets. He sat with Elraya late one night under the palace garden tree. "They'll strike soon," he said. "I know," she replied, her voice calm. "I won't let you die for this," he said. "You didn't let me live in chains," she whispered. "So don't ask me to go back to them." The rebellion didn't begin with swords. It began with a message. Jocks and Elraya walked into the central square, stood on the ancient speaker's stone, and told the truth. Not about love, not about rights, but about fear. About how long they all had lived under it, and how powerful fear becomes when no one dares to speak. The speech spread like wildfire, copied by hand, whispered in alleyways, shouted from rooftops. The rebellion had no flag, no anthem, no leader. Only an idea: what if the chains were never real? The council responded with violence. 10 citizens were arrested. 3 vanished. 2 were hanged by morning, but it was too late. The people had seen the cracks in the golden mask, and now they wanted to rip it off. In the palace, tension rose. Servants stopped bowing. Soldiers looked away instead of saluting. Even some council members began holding private meetings without permission. Theen returned one evening with a wound on her arm. She had been helping smuggle food to rebels hiding in the hills. Jocks cleaned the wound without a word. "You should stay here," he said. Theen smiled and missed history. That night, Elraya gathered her maids. "We are no longer royal attendants," she said. "We are fighters, messengers, protectors. We're not just standing with Jocks anymore," she added. "We're standing with every girl who was told to stay quiet." The maids raised their blades. They had once feared their future. Now they would fight to shape it. Jocks and Elraya met with rebel groups in secret. Farmers, builders, even ex-soldiers came with rusty weapons and sharpened hopes. They didn't trust each other at first, but one look at Jocks, still scarred, still standing, and they listened. "He could have ruled us," one rebel said. "But he chose to walk away." "Let's walk with him," someone whispered. And that's when the rebellion truly began. The High Council sent a final message. A public order: surrender the human by sunrise, or face full invasion. Elraya read the message, tore it in half, and threw it into the fire. Jocks didn't speak. He just picked up his old axe, still stained from the day he split the champion, and nodded. "If this is how they want it," he said, "then we give them something they'll never forget." Far across the stars, ships began to move. Elite forces trained for total control. But they didn't know what waited for them. Not a human, not a princess, not a rebellion, but a broken empire. And the fire that was about to consume it from within. The sky turned dark long before night arrived. It wasn't clouds. It wasn't rain. It was ships, hundreds of them, hovering above the capital like silent predators. The High Council's army had arrived. Dressed in black armor and law, they came not to fight, but to remind everyone who held the chains. But this time, the people didn't run. They gathered in the square, holding old tools. Broken shields, stolen weapons, some had nothing but bare hands and burning eyes. Jocks stood at the front, axe in hand, armor strapped tight. Beside him stood Elraya, no longer a princess, but a warrior with fire in her blood. Her maids flanked her, wearing armor made from melted temple bells, each carrying the will to die free. "They outnumber us 10 to 1, Jocks whispered. "They've always outnumbered us," Elraya replied. "But today, we're not afraid," from the council tower. The high priest gave the signal. The soldiers moved like a machine, forming a wall of shields. Jocks stepped forward, raising his voice. "No more slaves," he shouted. "No more masters," Elraya added, and the crowd roared. The battle began in dust and thunder, screams mixed with metal. But something was different. Jocks didn't fight alone anymore. The people who once feared him now followed his lead. He charged into the front line. Ducking a blade, smashing a shield, El-Raya struck beside him, fast and precise. Every movement they made was in rhythm, like a dance they had practiced in pain. The soldiers were trained, but they weren't ready for hearts that burned. One by one, their lines cracked. Not because the rebels had better weapons, but because they had something the army lost long ago: hope. Up in the tower, the High Council watched in horror. "They're winning," one gasped. "No," the High Priest snarled. "They are just louder." He pressed a crystal panel, triggering the final wave. Giant war mechs dropped from the sky. Machines built to crush cities, but as they landed, the ground beneath them shook not from weight, but from betrayal. Some of the pilots inside turned off their weapons, stepped out, and joined the rebels. "I used to believe in you," one said to a council guard. "Now I believe in them." The battle became chaos. Smoke, fire, broken glass. But through it all, Jox kept moving. He was struck, sliced, burned, but never fell. El-Raya saw him stumble and ran to his side. "Not now," she whispered, holding him up. "We end this together." They reached the base of the tower, where the High Council stood cornered. The elders raised energy blades, eyes wide with hate and fear. "You bring ruin," one shouted. "No," Jock said. "You built a cage and called it order." Then El-Raya stepped forward. Facing her past, "I was raised by your lies," she said. "Now I'll bury them." And with one swift strike, she shattered the council's banner in two. The crowd cheered, not for blood, not for victory, but because the chains were gone, not just the ones made of steel, but the ones in their minds. Jox collapsed near the fountain, bleeding from his side. El-Raya fell to her knees beside him, tears mixing with ash. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." He smiled weakly. Hours later, the sun rose over a new city. The people stood together, tired but free. The council's tower was empty, its halls quiet, and in the palace square, a new law was written, not on paper, but in hearts. No one owns another. El-Raya stood before the people with her maids at her back. She no longer wore a crown, she wore scars, and the people loved her more for it. Jox was healing slowly, his body broken, but his spirit alive, every day. Children came to see the man who split the champion and walked away from power. He smiled at them, taught them to fight not with fists, but with truth. And in the quiet of the night, when the stars returned, El-Raya sat beside him, holding his hand. "Are you still my master?" she asked softly. Jox laughed. "I was never your master. You were the one who freed me." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And now we're free," she whispered. "No," he said, looking at the stars. "Now we begin."